Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of the UPS MD-11. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt. Good afternoon to you, Richard.
Yeah, just turned afternoon here,
Yeah,
and good evening to you, Jeffrey.
thank you. Viewers, this episode is Pilots Are Not to Blame. It's episode 268. Many of you have asked why, if the aircraft started to slow before V1, why the crew continued with the takeoff. Greg Collins, 3404, says, so, were the pilots in error not to reject the takeoff before achieving V1? Was the decrease in acceleration enough, or were there warning signals so soon to make a rejected takeoff decision? Mario Sweet Guitar Music, still don't understand why takeoff was not aborted. It must have been obvious. It was a major engine failure, and what else not? Pilots knew they were heading for public buildings and should have aborted and wrecked this very old tri-jet instead on the ground. Okay, and Bernard Mueller, 5676, so you were saying the problem started before V1 and the pilots did just go on, or am I misinterpreting it? So there's a bit of confusion there, Richard. Perhaps you can
Yeah,
clarify for the viewers.
yeah, it is quite confusing. So, Bernard, I am not saying that the pilots just went on regardless. The problems with the engine, in the engine, started before V1. But the pilots did not know about it until the alarm bell went in the cockpit 37 seconds after the takeoff roll had started, and that was precisely at V1.
Hmm.
So the problem in the engine started several seconds before that, but the pilots only heard the alarm bell at V1 when they were committed to rotating the aircraft and taking off. So I don't think you'll misinterpret it. I think we need to be very careful about the timing sequence.
Hmm.
And for those viewers who've not had the chance to watch all 5 episodes on the UPS crash up to this point, let me recap the key points. We believe it is very important, before jumping to conclusion and blaming the pilots, that you do go through all of the episodes on UPS 2976 crash and listen very carefully to exactly what we're saying and not what you think we might be saying. Captain Christian Van Heijs stated in our tribute episode the following: I can't help thinking what I would or could have done in such a scenario. My only conclusion is nothing at all. And he goes on, out of respect for the crew and their families, I hesitated to post this, but I feel it's important to acknowledge the difficult realities of our profession. I concluded yesterday's episode with the statement, I am sure that the pilots were doing everything to try and save the aircraft. The pilots, in our view, are not to blame. There is nothing they could have done differently to avoid the crash. They were doing everything that they could to try and save the aircraft from crashing. Many viewers ask, why was the takeoff not aborted? Or state that the pilots should have aborted the takeoff. Let me go through what we know so far. In episode 265, the UPS 2976 Crash Analysis Part 1, we state the left engine fire started at V1 at 37 seconds after toga was set. And we also state the NTSB report that a repeating bell could be heard in the cockpit voice recording 37 seconds after the takeoff thrust was applied, and the repeating bell persisted until the end of the recording 25 seconds later. The cockpit alarm occurred precisely at V1 when the aircraft is committed to take off. And if you want to abort a takeoff and come to a halt within the length of the remaining runway, you have to do that before V1. In episode 266, part 2 of our crash analysis, we state the two root causes were the left engine failure and the pylon structural failure. In episode 267, the cause, question mark, a viewer asked, which failed first, the engine or the pilot? And we showed an analysis of the acceleration along the runway and concluded the engine thrust started to decrease before the pylon separated from the wing. V1, and I quote from that episode, V1 is still achieved, but the thrust decreases by 38% from the peak level of 100% thrust between 25 seconds and 34 seconds into the roll. And I continue to quote from yesterday's episode, V1 is reached after 37 seconds and thrust picks up to a level of 74% between 34 seconds and 42 seconds into the roll. The takeoff was 500 meters longer than usual and 5 seconds longer than usual. And we stated that as a consequence of the left engine fire, which continued after rotation, and the pylon separation, and debris being ingested into the center engine, we saw a momentary flash from the center engine exhaust after rotation. And we also showed two geolocated pictures from different angles, both showing the nose of the aircraft quite high off the ground and the fire continuing after rotation. This disaster was not caused by the takeoff roll being 500 meters or 5 seconds longer than usual. This disaster was caused by the 0.3% minimum climb gradient being eroded by a dual engine failure after V1 was achieved. First, the left engine failed and separated, and a fire started at V1. And second, the center engine thrust was reduced just before V1 and picked up again after V1, but not enough to avoid a tail strike on the UPS building on Grade Lane after takeoff. We showed an analysis of the engine and pylon separation, the engine fire, the damage to the UPS building from the tail strike, the aircraft airborne over Grade Lane and Knopp Avenue, and the aircraft out of control and tilting over drastically, demolishing the left wing and with the right wing almost vertically upwards in the air. In our view, the pilots are not to blame. An aircraft is designed to cope with a single engine failure on takeoff, but not a dual engine failure. And the aircraft did achieve V1 and VR, but did not achieve a positive rate of climb. So you have to be very careful before you start blaming the pilots that they should have aborted the takeoff, to go into the detail of what they knew at what point in time. And in my view, the alarm bell was the first sign that they had that there was something wrong and they were already committed to the takeoff.
Yes, it's certainly a complex a crash to analyze, Richard, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And the sequence of what was actually going on in the engine versus
Mm.
what was known about what was going on in the left engine in the cockpit is, I think, the key misunderstanding that people have. The engine started to fail earlier than V1, but that wasn't apparent to
Yeah.
the pilots
No.
until they were on V1 or just after.
In fact, we've got a good question coming up about that in a minute, Richard, which I'm sure you'll be interested in. Um, but before we go any further, viewers, please subscribe to us. Please do like us. Please keep those great questions coming. And please do keep those lovely comments coming. And we also do appreciate the support we're getting from the community as well. So just a bit of a shout out there to our viewers. Now, as I mentioned, Richard, John Joe 6886 says, I think one of the comments hit the nail. The engine internally failed, causing it to lock up, and the resultant lateral torque broke the pylon. It's an interesting observation.
It is. And it'd be very interesting to see the result of the NTSB analysis on the engine failure and whether the internal failure did indeed cause the engine to lock up,
Mm,
and the resultant torque broke the pylon. Well, it could also be that the engine torque exposed a weakness in the pylon, and the pylon could not handle the forces resulting from the engine failure. And I guess the NTSB will be analyzing very carefully all the recovered parts of the debris and especially the break points between the pylon and the wing and the engine and the pylon. So
mm,
we'll await that with interest. Now, we're showing a screenshot of the wing and engine and pylon mounts. The engine is fixed to the pylon and the pylon is fixed to the wing. There are two engine mounts to the pylon, a front engine mount to the forward pylon mount, and a rear engine mount to the aft pylon mount. And then there are two pylon mounts to the wing, a front pylon compartment to the pylon forward bulkhead, and a rear pylon compartment to the pylon aft bulkhead. And as of now, the investigation into UPS 2976 crash is still in progress, and no definitive cause has yet been publicly released about the left engine failure and its detachment from the aircraft. The aircraft, an MD-11F registration N259UP, operated by UPS Airlines, suffered a detachment of the left-hand number one engine and its associated pylon during takeoff. That much is known. And the FAA issued an emergency airworthiness directive grounding all MD-11s and all predecessor aircraft. And there's quite a long list of models that are affected. The DC-1010, the 1010F, the 1015, the 1030, the 1030F, the KC-10A, the KDC-10, the DC-1040 and the 1040F, and the MD-10 and the MD-11, and all of their variants. So it's quite a long list of aircraft covered by the FAA's Emergency Airworthiness Directive. And what the FAA are wanting before these aircraft fly again is an inspection precisely of the engine pylon structures. And they want all of the aircraft checked in order to ensure there isn't any fatigue or fracture or corrosion or any other issue with which would make the aircraft not airworthy in terms of its physical structure.
Yes, as far as the DC-10s are concerned, the most notable ones is there's an Orbis I hospital. There's a DC-1030, I think it is. And then there's the Tanker 10 fleet, which do the aerial firefighting. And they're based in, I think it's Arizona. And there's about 4 or 5 of them that very spectacular use of a commercial aeroplane with dropping fire retardant. So they're impacted. Now, Phil Bartlett, 7898, thanks as always to both of you for your continuing analysis of this awful tragedy. The worrying part for me was the mention of this particular airframe's history. And I just wonder whether we have seen the final MD-11F in flight. As a matter of interest, did the DC-10 totally cease operations? Because if I remember correctly, there was a flying hospital built into the DC-10 some time ago. I'm sorry, I've already partly answered that.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead of the viewers,
Yeah. Sorry,
Jeffrey.
viewers. Sorry, Richard.
So, an emergency airworthiness directive has been issued because the DC-10 family shares the same engine pylon attachment design as the Boeing, now previously McDonnell Douglas MD-11. And so, having witnessed this engine pylon separation in the UPS crash, they're going back through all aircraft which have the same design and getting them checked. And yeah, there is a really interesting example with the Orbis International operating a fully equipped ophthalmic hospital aboard an aircraft. They started off with a DC-8 and then moved to a DC-10, and then they upgraded to an MD-10. And the aircraft includes a full operating room, recovery room, a classroom for training local medical staff, and audio-visual links to observe surgery live remotely, and various other modules. And later, Orbis upgraded to an MD-10, which was donated by FedEx Express to them. And they fly around the world delivering ophthalmic hospital treatment and surgery in a number of countries which don't have the hospital locally. So I think it's quite a fantastic job that they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And for those viewers who don't know, an MD-10 is a DC-10 with a MD-11 cockpit, two-man electronic cockpit, upgraded freight floor. And that's why there was a program run with FedEx, and quite a number of DC-10s were upgraded to that variant, reflecting the MD-11 electronic cockpit and other improvements. So just to fill you in with a bit of trivia. Alan Riches, 9381. Hey guys, can you help me with these questions regarding the pylon? How is the pylon attached to the wing, bolted, welded to the wing structure? Did bolts fail or welds fail? Did pylon get ripped off? With the left engine failure, there would have been a tremendous number of vibrations going into the pylon to cause it to fail. Would this be correct? And Stephanie Farcombe Smith, 8509, good question. I was going to ask the same thing. Richard.
Oh, the viewers really want to know the nuts and bolts of this.
They do.
Um,
Yeah.
the pylon is not welded to the wing structure, and there are different types of engine mounts and pylon mounts. depending on the aircraft and the engine variant used. And we're showing a screenshot with an example of a side engine mount and a pylon mount. Now, these do vary, as I say, from aircraft to aircraft and from engine to engine, but you get an idea from this example of what an engine mount looks like and what a pylon mount looks like. And in this example, the engine front mount on the side of the engine, in this case, from both a front and rear view, is shown on the left side of the picture. And on the right side of the picture, you can see the pylon mounts on the inboard mid-spar and outboard mid-spar of this particular aircraft.
And also another aside for viewers, the DC-10 pylon mount to the CF6 engine and the Pratt & Whitney engine. An interesting little sidelight. When the DC-10 was launched, McDonnell Douglas actually gave the pylon design to Airbus for their A300 Airbus. That was their first aircraft, because that was also powered by General Electric's CF6 engine, and they wanted commonality for other airlines that were buying both aircraft. So the pylon was common to the A300, A310 aircraft as well. So John Duula, he's good question actually, Rich. And I think a lot of people probably asking this question: is metal fatigue testing on all aircraft conducted regularly? If yes, it seems the task would be extremely time-consuming and costly. Well, yeah. What are your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, and one of the things that has happened due to airworthiness directives is an increase in the number of tests and the frequency of those tests. But I think, Jeffrey, you can probably best answer this one.
Okay, all right. Well, yes, because I wrote a book on the 787, so I know a little bit about it. So what happens with a new aircraft? It comes off the first couple come off the production line, or maybe ship 2 or ship 3, and they are taken away and put into a test rig, and they are tested virtually to destruction to test out the structural integrity. So the original, say the 777, it was put into a fatigue rig, and it was tested for the equivalent of 120,000 flights, or about twice the aircraft's expected design lifetime. And it's, as I said, mounted into a ground test rig where 100 computer-controlled hydraulic actuators were used to apply loads, simulating a full spectrum of in-service conditions, maneuvers, gusts, landing loads, pressurization cycles. So the fuselage is pushed in and out and pushed in and out. At the same time, the wing is bent up and down, simulating 120,000 flights. Now, on the 787, they ran a 5-year full-scale fatigue test on the 787, and they simulated 165,000 hours of flight on that, which was extraordinary. And I've got a photo which I'll get, it's up on the screen now, which shows the 787 in the test rig, and you'll see the wings bent right up. And what happens is after that 165,000 hours of flight, the wings then must be bent up to 150% of their design load without cracking. So it's an extraordinary test. And then, as Richard mentioned, airlines then keep reporting in, looking out for any fatigue or any problem, and they report back to the manufacturer, who then alerts airlines, well, look, this particular part is wearing out a fraction faster than we thought, you need to replace it. So it's an ongoing process of dialogue between the airlines and the aircraft manufacturer. But the test to start off with is very comprehensive and usually incredibly effective. Now, Richard, let's move on from structures, and well, we're going to stay on structures. We've had this very interesting question and answers from the viewers, again related to the engine and the pylon. Philip GR100, he says, I assume the engine will only be dropped before the aircraft is taken off. It would not be very safe for the public on the ground to have an engine dropped after takeoff, as it will fall to the ground like a meteor to be a hazard. Of course, Philip's referring to the design of whereby the engine will separate from the pylon under extreme stress or extreme conditions. Ordinary Man 6996 says, it's my understanding that in the event of an engine fire, the engine is designed to detach regardless of altitude. I remember several stories in the 70s of large chunks of blue ice falling through people's roofs, obviously frozen toilet tank discharge from fuel tanks. Clive D2G adds, pilots do not drop engines. There is no lever to jettison an engine. If the load on the fuse pins holding the engine exceed a certain value, the fuse pins shear, which allows the engine to separate to prevent further damage to the aircraft wing. Jan NCFL, Ordinary Man 6996 is right. The fuse pins will fail in case of an overload, regardless of the position and altitude of the aircraft. There are no means for the flight crew to jettison a damaged engine manually. The crucial point is that the engine has to detach from the pylon, not the pylon from the wing, which happened here. A well-known case where also an engine pylon detached and unfortunately collided with the outboard engine on the same side, tearing it off as well, was LL Flight 1862, a Boeing 747-258 freighter, which crashed in Amsterdam in the early 90s. That actually claimed a few lives. Ordinary Man 6996 in reply to Clive, correct, the purpose of the shear pins is to save the airplane by dropping a damaged engine. Where it lands is where it lands. Richard, from you, perhaps some clarity and more detail.
Yeah. Well, we've talked at length now, I think, about the fuse pins or shear pins, as they're sometimes called. And they are designed to fail, but in a controlled way, not just random process failure, but in a controlled manner. And the separation of an engine from the pylon must be controlled to the extent possible to avoid damage to the wing or to the fuselage or to the tail or to the other engines. Obviously, in a four-engine aircraft, the separation of one wing engine should not take out the other wing engine with it. And on a three-engine aircraft, the separation of a wing engine must not take out the center rear tail engine or damage the horizontal or vertical stabilizer in the tail. And on a two-engine aircraft, it's still the same. The separation of a wing engine must clear the tail of the aircraft. So in all cases, damage to flight controls, especially the ailerons, the elevator, and the rudder, must be avoided. So these shear pins are very cleverly engineered to fail in a controlled and directional manner. Now, that doesn't always happen, but at least it's what is the design intent.
Before we close, Richard, this question and answer on MH370. A lot of viewers are asking about MH370. Yunchen 6407. I'm still waiting for the long expected searching of MH370, which was promised to resume in November. Today is already the 15th of November, but the boat Armada 7806 is located in southeast of the UK. It sounds hopeless. And a reply came in from John Isley, our friend, 4578. Hello, if you have watched the earlier episodes, you would know that it is now most likely Armada 8605 rather than 7806 They will be hopefully resuming the search soon. The weather in the southern Indian Ocean is likely causing the delay. The best time for this is probably between December and April. I hope this information is helpful. Richard.
Yeah, well, thank you, John, for answering the query. And as we say, a lot of people are asking. So we plan an update on Ocean Infinity, where all their vessels are currently, and what the plan might be for the search for MH370. We're planning that episode tomorrow. There are currently no ships in the MH370 search area, apart from a number of fishing vessels and a couple of cargo ships passing through. So we're keeping a watching brief on that area, and we're also watching on the Ocean Infinity vessels worldwide. So the full update on that front tomorrow.
I look forward to that. I'm sure a lot of viewers will be. So, Richard, let's finish with these three comments. Craig Novi, 2090. Astonishing, detailed episode touching on so many aspects of this crash. A big thank you to Richard discussing my official airport-based videos of the crash are not automatically released. I can never thank you gentlemen enough for all the facts and wisdom I have learned here on Airline News. Jim C67. Another very insightful episode, Jeffrey and Richard. Such a tragic loss. Thank you for providing expert analysis. I'm a mere aviation enthusiast. I really appreciate the depth of knowledge of you two gents. Thanks again for your brilliant channel. And TuneSmith2, absolutely love the total calm and discipline of the English. Total professionals. And replying, Dan, November Tango 2, Yankee Bravo, says, Jeffrey is an Australian and both are brilliant. No, I agree with that. Please,
It's all right, Jeffrey. We'll forgive you for being an Australian.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yes, look, they're very, very kind comments from those viewers, and we do appreciate the many, many kind comments we get, and they're really wonderful, and there is an enormous amount of work that goes into these episodes, particularly from obviously from Richard doing this deep analysis. So, Richard, once again, thank you for your fabulous work on this.
You're very welcome. And in terms of English, I'm sorry that I sometimes speak with a bit of a German or French accent. And I would also remind those viewers for whom English is not their first language, that our episodes are synchronized and dubbed and subtitled. It sometimes takes 24 hours, but they are available in a number of different languages.
There's quite a few, actually. I was very impressed on how many languages they are available in. So that's great. So as Richard mentioned, viewers, we're going to be back tomorrow with an update on MH370. And the following day, we're going to come circle back onto Air India 171 because there's a number of things happening there that we want to bring to your attention. So we'll be circling back on that. We haven't forgotten about that at all. So please do tune in tomorrow. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, please subscribe to us. Please do like us. Please keep those great comments coming and those great questions. We do appreciate them very much. And we look forward to your company tomorrow. So again, Richard, thank you for your effort.
You're welcome.
Thank you, viewers. And see you tomorrow.